Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of the Contrarian. Just thrilled to welcome to us for the first time Representative Jason Crow from Colorado. Welcome.
Thanks, Jen. It's great to be with you.
Great to see you. So you have a military background, and I'm curious what your reaction was to this mismatch really on both ends of the Iran action. First, in Trump openly disagreeing with his security and team, his intelligence community, on whether Iran was really that close to weaponizing a bomb. And then on the back end, where he jumped out to claim that we had destroyed the program, when in fact it seems like we may have set it back a matter of months. Talk to us about that from your own perspective in the military.
Yeah, I look at it through two different lenses. One lens as a member of Congress, and the other is, the paratrooper and the ranger that I used to
Yes.
be. I'm not going to say how long ago it was.
That's okay.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute, but I started my career in public service as a paratrooper and an Army Ranger. Was sent to war 3 times to fight for this country, and was sent to Iraq on faulty, altered intelligence, right?
Yes.
And we spent a decade and a half in Iraq, over $1 trillion fighting that war. Thousands of service members lost credibility because we stopped having the discussion. We stopped having the debate, the open debate that's required by Congress to vote on this, to be held accountable, to go back home and to tell the American people why we're spending money, why we're spending, their blood and treasure. And that's what happens when we stop having that debate. So when we talk about process, when we talk about the unconstitutionality and why Congress should be involved, this isn't an abstraction for me, right? Like, I just don't want Congress to be involved because I'm a member of Congress and I just want to be involved and I want to be in the room. That's not what it's about. I want to be involved because that is the check. That is the ultimate check that our framers put in place to ensure accountability and ensure that the ultimate and the biggest decision that elected officials can ever make, that is to send our young men and women in the conflict, is an open, transparent, and accountable one. So that's number one. Number two is, I'm just so sick and tired of, these Washington elites that talk tough and pound their chest and saber rattle from air-conditioned offices in Washington, and then they send working class kids like me off to do their fighting and do the dirty work, right? Every time someone like, Rick Grinnell or Donald Trump or somebody else pounds their chest and talks tough, it's some kid from the Midwest, from the Western United States, from Colorado, from Wisconsin, that has to pick up a rifle and go and do the tough work, right? And that's where my career started. I was a private. I became a captain. I take this stuff really seriously, and I just bristle every time these folks talk tough that have never done it themselves. And then,
Absolutely.
then the third is, the appetite for American people. American people just don't have an appetite to be pulled into
Right.
another long-term Middle East war, right? They just don't. That's not to say that we shouldn't defend ourselves, and if there's a problem that we shouldn't address it, but that's why the conversation is important.
Absolutely. Now that, frankly, the horse is out of the barn, Congress still has a role to play because, of course, the War Powers Act puts a deadline on any deployment of troops for 60 days. Do you think the House will vote on a War Powers resolution? And what do you imagine the result might be if they do?
Well, they absolutely should. We absolutely should vote on a resolution. I've been pushing this almost since day one, since I've been a member of Congress. It's for the reasons I just talked about. This is one of the most important things to me, that I believe that Congress needs to reassert its constitutional authority and retake those blank checks that we've given, frankly, to Republican and Democrat administrations. We've had
Yes.
five presidential administrations, both Republican and Democrat. There have been 12 Congresses now, both Republican and Democrat controlled, that have basically given blank checks in the form of these authorizations for use of military force after 9/11 that have been justified for dozens of different conflicts, open-ended strikes, trillions of dollars spent. It's time to take that back and to force debate. So I would love that to happen. But here's God's honest truth. I'm not holding my breath for the Republican-controlled Congress to put this to a vote. I just don't think Speaker Johnson and the Republicans in the Senate or the House are willing to do anything to stand up to Donald Trump at this point.
I think that's sadly probably the case. Let me turn over to the reconciliation bill that is now making its way through the Senate. I think they managed to make it worse, actually, in terms of cuts to Medicaid. If this thing passes in any form similar to what it currently is, how would it affect your district?
Well, I have about 175,000 people in my district, the families that I represent that rely on Medicaid for life-saving health care, for medication, for insulin. And those folks are at risk of losing that health care, which is absolutely devastating. There's no doubt people will die if this happens. Of all the things that I voted on, I've been in Congress for 6.5 years now. And of all the things that I'm voting on, I can tell you this is the worst bill I have ever seen, which is saying something, because I've seen some bad stuff. The 16 million Americans that could lose their health care. And for everybody else, there's a lot of people who might be wondering, well, I'm not on Medicaid, my family's not on Medicaid, why should I care? Well, you should care because, when Americans die or suffer, every American should care, first and foremost. But also, if people are sick and can't work and can't contribute to our economy, that impacts everybody, right? When children get sick and families get sick, that has a reverberating effect across our entire community, always. And then on top of it, this bill would remove $1 trillion from our healthcare system. Now, just think about, even if you're on a platinum employer-sponsored program, say you have the best healthcare, money can buy. It's still hard to get an appointment. It's still hard to find a practitioner. It's still hard to navigate that system. Just think what's going to happen when $1 trillion is removed, hospitals shut down, clinics shut down, doctors and nurses and radiology techs leave the profession because they can't afford the reimbursement rates anymore. It is going to blow up the whole system. And you think the wait times are bad now? Just you wait and see.
There's also, of course, devastating cuts to SNAP and food support. Tell us how that might affect your district or other districts in Colorado, and what this does to state budgets, who will be compelled to try to fill the gap.
Yeah, so this is another devastating component of this SNAP, cutting life-saving food aid to children and families, right? So I would love somebody to tell me in this administration how they think sending kids to school hungry is good for any community. They obviously can't, right? Because kids can't learn. There'll be behavioral issues when people are hungry. Nothing else matters, right? This is like basic needs stuff, right? You can't learn, you can't contribute, you can't be a full part of any society or community if you're literally hungry. It's just crazy. And by the way, all of this is being done to basically do the largest transfer of wealth in our nation's history, from working class Americans to the wealthy, right? This is fundamental trickle-down economics, which has proven not to work, right? It just hasn't. We've tried it a number of times before, and it doesn't trickle down. And yet here we are again, right? Giving tax breaks to the top 1% into large corporations, and everybody else is left holding the bag.
Republican colleagues say, how do they justify to you or themselves or their constituents if they want to vote for this thing, or if they have voted for this thing?
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance is pretty unbelievable here on Capitol Hill, I got to tell you, right? I've struggled with this idea, how can people continue to prostrate themselves to Donald Trump when they tell me privately that they detest the man, that they don't like him, that they're just waiting him out. And I'm like, well, how can you possibly do this and make people suffer just because you want to keep the job? And I came to Congress from the military, right? I didn't come directly from the military because I was a lawyer as well. But, the fundamental defining experience of my life, the leadership experience of my life, was the military before coming to Congress. So I just have this tendency to think the best of people, that when people go into public service, that it's, you know, service above self, that it's a sacrifice, because by definition, public service has to be a sacrifice. You have to be giving more than you're getting. I like to assume the best of people when they come here into service, but I've come to realize that there's an awful lot of people here that just want to keep the job. They like the title, they like the job, they like being a member of Congress, and that becomes more important to them than anything, and they'll do anything, including sell out their principles, to do that, right?
Right.
And what tells me that the number one test for this job, in my opinion, is there has to be at least one, if not more, things that you would do that if you knew you did, you would lose the job.
Right.
What would you be willing to give up this job for if that vote came to the floor? And if you can't answer that question, then you have no business being here and doing this.
I think that question is probably foreign. It would never even dawn on many of your Republican colleagues, unfortunately. Well, certainly it has mobilized voters, and Democrats, if this goes through, will certainly have a powerful message to run on. If people still are terribly upset by this, and they are, is there still room, do you think, to affect some of your colleagues? Is there room to affect the Senate? What should ordinary Americans do?
Well, they should do what we've been seeing them do, put enormous pressure on their representatives and their senators, right? Show up to the town halls if your representative happens to be holding them, which is a whole different problem. If your rep or your senator has stopped holding town halls, that should tell you something, right? It tells you a lot, right? It tells you they know that what they're doing is not in the interest of their community. They know that, and the community's pissed off about it, so they're going to stop listening, right? So if your rep is still holding these town halls, show up, calls, emails, just relentless flows of pressure does matter, because the solution to what I talked about earlier, this sense that people want to hold the job more than anything, if that's true for somebody, then the key to solving this is shifting their risk assessment from being afraid of Donald Trump to being more afraid of their constituents again. Because right now they're more concerned about running crosswise Donald Trump. So their constituents need to be like, no, you need to be more worried about me. and that's where getting fired up and mobilized is important.
Well put. Well, thank you so much, Congressman, for spending the time. Thank you for your service in the military and now as a civilian. And we'll hope at least some members of the Republican Party come to their senses. So we will look forward to having you back soon.
Yeah,
Thanks so
good
much.
chatting. Thank you.
You too. Bye.